Welcome, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us here today to talk about the unsung advantage, non-technical skills in the UAS industry. We're going to be looking in particular, or Chris in particular is going to be looking at human factors and crew resource management, the non-technical skills of the UAS industry. Covering the requirement for optimised non-technical skills within the uncrewed sphere is not only vital as for crewed flight, but also introduces new demands not experienced in the traditional cockpit environment. Thank you very much for joining us, Chris. I know from talking to you previously and obviously checked you out on LinkedIn, Chris is an experienced military and civilian aviator and a leader within both the rotary and fixed-wing environment. He's a specialist in the field of human factors and crew resource management, and he's also got extensive experience within the uncrewed sector and is thus uniquely placed to assist teams in navigating the increasingly demanding challenges faced in such operations. Well, I'm delighted to welcome you, Chris, today, and I'm much looking forward to the webinar and your presentation in particular. So please take it away if you'd like to share.
Certainly, I'll just check that's coming through.
You're doing. That is indeed, yes. I will mute myself and remove my camera too.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you very much indeed for that very kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Let's get straight into the topic. You're all busy people. If I gave each of you £300,000 and asked you to tell me how you would upgrade your uncrewed operating system, I suspect that by far the majority would tell me about how you would develop your autopilot systems, your airframe components, your control systems, or your data links. I equally suspect that not many of you would come back to me with a focus on upgrading the singular most important component of the entire system, the component that, for by far the majority of the time, ensures that the system works effectively, resolves issues, adapts to the changing environment, and responds effectively to malfunctions and emergencies, namely your human operators. Now, we invest in our comms links, our payloads, our software, and our aircraft, but how often do we look to upgrade the software and firmware of our operators? How often do we upgrade their interfaces or databases? And I'd suggest it's rarely, if ever. And that's what we're going to address this morning. We're going to look at the huge, yet mostly unsung advantage that is to be gained by those individuals and organisations that choose to take control of their team development, reducing incidents, increasing productivity, and boosting development. So, by way of introduction, as Elena's mentioned, my name is Chris Davies, and I'm a co-director of Volaria Performance. We deliver human factors and human performance training and consultancy services to a broad range of industries that work in complex system of systems scenarios, often in environments that incorporate an elevated degree of risk. But our particular specialisation, however, is within the uncrewed space. Now, we've amassed many years of experience within aviation more broadly and uncrewed operations in particular, both in the civil and military domains. We're qualified as trainers and examiners within both CAA and MAA frameworks and work closely with both regulators on human factors aspects within the uncrewed environment. Most importantly, we're absolutely passionate and committed about bringing the same level of non-technical skills training and opportunities to the uncrewed industry as has been enjoyed by our crewed counterparts for decades. So, over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll cover what are non-technical skills, why are they relevant to UAS uncrewed operations, what benefits may be gained, and finally we'll look at how we can go about upgrading our human systems. And then we'll go on to the standard Q&A session. So Let's start with the first of those topics. What are non-technical skills? It's important from the very outset to clarify what it is we're talking about when we use this phrase non-technical skills. When we're referring to, and I'll often refer to them as NTS, as we're talking this morning, to NTS within an aviation environment such as uncrewed operations, we're encompassing aspects such as those shown here. The formalized study and training associated with the disciplines of human factors and crew and team resource management are covered under non-technical skills. And in many ways, we can consider NTS to be synonymous with that phrase human factors, with which many of you will already be familiar. And indeed, all of the other aspects referenced in this slide may equally be considered to fall within the field of human factors. But the phrase also incorporates the consideration of threats and errors and how we manage them. It covers the interactions that we have, whether that's with other people, the work environment, the equipment we use, the processes and procedures, etc. It includes the cognitive processes that lie behind the individual's actions and performance, and also that individual's personal qualities and behaviours. And finally, it incorporates the methodologies, the structures, the cultures and approaches applied by individuals and organisations. Now, these skills complement the technical abilities, skills and resources, and are a crucial component in what keeps your operations safe, efficient and functional. Examples of these non-technical skills will include any of the elements shown here, but this is by no means an exhaustive list, and it's purely intended to be indicative of the elements that comprise that term non-technical skills. If you take a brief moment now to translate some of what you're seeing on screen, some of those elements into your own normal work environment. In a complex systems-based operations, such as those in our industry, I'm sure you'll agree that all of these components play a regular and fundamental role in the conduct of safe and effective operations. And when considered in this way, it quickly becomes fairly self-evident why it's so important that we invest in developing this aspect of our operations in the same way that we so routinely look to improve our technical capabilities. One final clarification in relation to the non-technical skills that we're discussing here this morning. When referencing that phrase, non-technical skills, I'm using it in its lowercase descriptive way. What I'm not talking about is no-techs. Now, those of you from a civilian commercial aviation background will have come across no-techs, and the phrase is indeed derived from that term, non-technical skills, but it refers to a very specific system for testing the non-technical skills of crew members, and it's a very particular and bounded definition. We today are referring to generic non-technical skills. So that defines what it is we're talking about when referencing NTS, and to a degree what we're not talking about as well. Now on to the question of why is it that NTS are relevant to UAS uncrewed operations? The short answer to the question is that there are two primary drivers. The first, and probably the most headline grabbing, of the reasons that non-technical skills, human factors, are relevant to uncrewed organisations and operators is that as part of the new CAA regulations for remote pilot competencies, the theory syllabus will include human performance limitations in the same way that it's already been a requirement for crewed aviation for some considerable years. So there will be a mandated component to why our industry is going to need to start considering this subject area. But regulation is always a terrible motivator for doing anything. So why else, other than because I have to, should you look to develop your non-technical skills? Well, another key driver will be the vital component of enhancing operational safety. It's been demonstrated conclusively within crewed aviation that poor human performance practices risk safety, they damage reputations, and are exceedingly expensive. Large organizations who've taken on NTS related programs focusing on human factors and human performance development have returned considerable savings and uplifts in operational efficiency and innovation. So there are clear legal and performance related drivers for investing in individual and team non-technical skills development. But before going further, let's address a couple of questions that are frequently raised in relation to non-technical skills within the uncrewed environment. Let's start with this aspect. Surely the fact that our air vehicles are uncrewed means that human factors is far less relevant than with crewed aviation. This one's a common notion and also one that's completely false. There are numerous aspects related to uncrewed operations that mean that operators' interactions with their system, their environment, their team, and uninvolved personnel face greater demands and challenges than those within the crewed environment. Aspects such as distributed information, geographic dislocation, comms barriers, remoteness from the system being operated, to name but a few. And we're working with the CAA and the MAA to address a range of additional issues that UAS teams face when compared to crewed, not fewer. Next, won't automation reduce the need to develop non-technical skills? Well, automation offers many benefits within any complex system of systems, but it also introduces considerable new challenges. Again, there's a raft of evidence that the human aspect of operations must be fully addressed in automated systems in order to avoid issues such as a loss of situational awareness, airframe dissociation, interface issues, and of course, automation surprise. Finally then, is it only for teams? And if not, how do individuals benefit? Whilst it's absolutely vital that operating teams develop their non-technical skills, obviously in order to enhance their performance, there remain a number of human factors challenges that are faced by an individual. Single operators can suffer from spatial disorientation, distraction, fatigue, system latency, environmental challenges, interfaces with uninvolved personnel, and so on. Having flown crewed aircraft for nearly 25 years and uncrewed system for the last 10, I can assure you that the non-technical skills, human factors challenges that I face in the uncrewed environment are not only as great as those in crewed aviation, but are actually probably greater. By way of illustration, let's look at some of the ways in which those non-technical skills, human factors elements that we mentioned earlier may be affected and what that may mean to you and your teams. Let's start with a significant component of maintaining the integrity of your operation, and that is the status of your situation or situational awareness at any given moment. I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with the concept, but for those that aren't, situational awareness refers to your understanding of the environment at any given moment, and it comprises the perception of information, the comprehension of that information, and the projection into what that will mean going forward, also known as the what, so what, now what. Whilst within aviation, the challenges to developing and maintaining a good level of situational awareness, or SA, have always been recognised, those challenges are even greater when dealing with uncrewed aircraft. aspects that will have a negative impact upon our ability to maintain SA when operating a drone of some kind are likely to include any or all of the following. To start with, unlike Uncrewed, you're remote from your aircraft, and in turn, the visual information you receive from that airframe is two-dimensional and with a limited field of view. It's not as if you can just turn and look out of a window. The teams operating the system may well be dispersed, and that in turn introduces communication barriers. And finally, there are levels of system latency unlikely to be seen in a crewed airframe. So whilst these issues have parallels in crewed aviation, they're particularly exacerbated in the uncrewed sphere by the fact that the aircraft and those operating it, as alluded to in that list, are remote from each other. For larger systems, that may of course include having team members that are themselves separated by some distance. Situational awareness is just one area that presents challenges, and whilst time precludes us going through the others in any detail, the following aspects also present particular difficulties in the uncrewed environment when compared with crewed aviation. And I'll just pause a moment so you can take in some of those, relating them to your own uncrewed operations. When you consider that crewed aviation has mandated training in human factors for decades now, you'll no doubt appreciate why we're so passionate about bringing this same capability to our industry. So we recognise the relevance of developing individual and team non-technical skills in terms of the negative consequences that we'll avoid, but what about the benefits to be gained? It's this focus on enhancing positive outcomes rather than merely avoiding negative ones, which ensures that by training ourselves and our teams in non-technical skills, we're no longer playing to not lose, we're now playing to win. The main benefits associated with developing team and individual non-technical skills may be considered under three primary banners. The first is improvements in safety, and that incorporates developing a far greater control over the operations you're conducting, and related to that, an understanding of the threats and risks associated with that operation. And that will inevitably lead to a reduction in error rates. The next will be upgraded performance in terms of improved productivity and output. That inevitably leads to enhancements in reputation, which of course in turn leads to uplifts in business. And finally, and probably most importantly, is the developments in learning that can be achieved. Such developments will lead to greater innovation, which will develop your operational aspects and ensure that you're getting optimum value from your team members. So, having identified the relevance and the benefits of non-technical system developments, how can an organisation of any size go about matching its investment in technical development with similar uplifts in its human resource? Although for all the reasons we've already covered, by far the majority of uncrewed operators will need to address the requirement for some manner of human factors training uplift, that does not mean that there should be an unholy rush to the nearest training provider. There's both time available and an imperative to ensure that the solution you choose is the right solution for your organisation. So please do consider the following. The first, understand your requirement. Consider the complexity of your system, the nature of your work, your operating environment, and the structure of your organisation, and have this information to hand as you proceed through the following steps. Next, identify the options that are open to you. When you're considering training options, ensure that your non-technical skills human factors training provider has a depth of experience in both human factors, which many UAS flying training organizations don't, and in uncrewed operations, which the majority of human factors and CRM training providers out there don't. So, for example, an organization that is just going to modify their HF crewed training offering won't incorporate aspects such as distributed information, airframe dissociation, automation surprise, geographic dislocation, information latency, all those elements that aren't a component of crewed aviation because they're specific to uncrewed operations. Next, consult widely. Ensure that the training that is on offer aligns with the requirements that you've identified in that first step. A small one-person BVLOS only organization is going to have very different upfront and ongoing training requirements to a large multi-crew, multi-aircraft BVLOS operation. Once you've gone through those elements, then you can go ahead, book your training and complete that training. Having completed the training, though, that's not the end of the story. In order to ensure that you recognize all of the benefits already described, ensure that you look to incorporate non-technical skills, principles into everything you do. You'll have invested in your human resource. Be sure to get the full return on that investment by maintaining their newfound array of non-technical skills. Finally, in order to give an illustration of the power of an approach that incorporates non-technical skills principles, let's consider a very small element that can make a very big difference. Now, many organizations don't bother to debrief their flights, and if they do, it tends to be somewhat cursory and often only considers the technical elements, particularly just the failures. And that leaves an enormous amount of invaluable learning still on the table, untouched. Let me provide for you now a sample of some questions that have been developed through a consideration of how human cognitive processes work. These kinds of questions, if incorporated into debriefs, will uncover information never previously considered and which offers a path towards rapid improvements in safety, in efficiency, and in learning. So such questions are: what happened the way we thought it would happen? And what surprised us? What hazards did we identify beforehand, and what hazards had we missed? Where did we have to make do, improvise, or adapt? And finally, and probably most importantly, what did we get away with? That question alone can uncover all manner of useful information. Such simple, quick, and cost-free adjustments to the way we do business, in this case incorporating just a few targeted questions into our debriefs, will make a remarkable difference to our ability to learn, which leads to development, innovation, and ultimately to a safer operating environment for all. They will harness the potential that's already there within our teams, and they're just a taste of the benefits that can be recognized. Now, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the time allotted for this presentation, but I'll be delighted to answer any of the questions that we may now have in the Q&A session.
Here we go. I shall come back again as well. Thank you, Chris. That was highly informative, and what a good start to looking at this element of human factors within the UAS industry. Thank you very much.
Not at all, my pleasure.
As I mentioned, I have a couple of questions already, which I will, which we can start with, as everyone else is absorbing what you've said and comes up with their own questions. So the first one is the kind of human factors training that you describe only required by remote pilots within an organisation, i.e. those who are actually controlling the aircraft in flight?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. Undoubtedly, remote pilots, whether they are conducting it through hands-on use of a controller or whether it's through some kind of interface as a system operator, undoubtedly they will get enormous benefit and will be mandated to have completed such training. But the greatest component comes from developing team interactions, such as communications, such as team situational awareness, minimizing distractions, leadership and teamwork aspects. The expanding of this training across the entire organization will offer far greater benefit than just focusing on those directly controlling the aircraft. Indeed, in crewed aviation, not only are the entire flight crew required and mandated to complete the training, but it also is incorporated into what's referred to as aviation-facing elements. So that includes air traffic controllers, it includes maintainers, and it even includes aviation support personnel. So in crewed aviation for some time, the importance of this across all areas has been recognised, and I have every faith that we not only should, but will be bringing that into uncrewed aviation as well.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. If an individual holds a human factors or crew resource management qualification, it sounds like somebody's coming here from the crewed side of things, from crewed aviation, will they need to re-qualify when moving across to uncrewed?
Okay, that from the perspective of their experience being relevant, undoubtedly, the human factors elements very definitely port across between the disciplines, even though there's additional elements that need to be considered in the uncrewed environment. There are, however, a number of details still outstanding in relation to how the CAA will apply the regulations in terms of human performance and limitations training requirements, and that includes aspects such as grandfather rights, which you've just alluded to, currencies, and so on and so forth. So whilst there will undoubtedly be benefits in someone with a crewed background bringing across that experience, at this stage we can't go firm on exactly what that will mean in terms of meeting the legislative requirements for uncrewed. Sure.
At least, however, it gives them a heads up on where they should be going and what they should be thinking about. So that's a positive start, isn't it? Do you want to just unshare your presentation, and then we'll focus back in on you and me?
Yep.
I've always thought that a lot of what we've done and what we've talked about when we talk about human factors is sort of aimed at what's coming, the BVLOS side of things, and certainly sort of the crew resource management is definitely there. But the questions that you suggested there, the debrief questions, those are absolutely relevant, I would suggest, to any and all drone operators, to think about what they've been doing and how they've managed to successfully cope with situations or where things have gone wrong. And I think those would be invaluable lessons for everyone to benefit from.
Yeah, without a doubt. And in fact, from the perspective of the Q&As, I assume as part of this recording, you'll be in a position to share our website. Via our website, Volaria Performance, we are providing, I've already alluded to the fact that we are absolutely passionate about making sure this is brought to the uncrewed industry at the same level. And so we lay on that a question submission capability that we will respond to any question, no marketing following up, no obligation. We just want people to be able to understand what's going on. So if people visit our website and go to the HF and CRM page, at the bottom, there's a form for submitting any question related to this kind of aspect, non-technical skills, human factors, human performance, that we will endeavour to answer. And please rest assured, no marketing emails to follow. We just want people to get the information that they need in this area.
That's a fantastic attitude to take, and thank you very much. It's wonderful to see that sort of collaborative input into the industry, and that's exactly what will sort of help take all these organisations forward. So thank you very much indeed. We're
always available, of course, on Discord as well. If there are any follow-on questions, no problem whatsoever.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Maybe we finish there, and as I say, we'll follow up with further questions via Discord and via direct communication with you. Thank you
Fantastic.
very much indeed, Chris. I found that absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure it will be much hugely beneficial to the wider industry.
Not at all. My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much then, everyone.